So welcome to the Courageous Nerd YouTube channel. My name is Connor. I'm joined today by Taylor Morden and Ralph Apel. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for
Terrific.
having us.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And obviously we'll be talking about your upcoming documentary, Getting Lost, which is coming out next year. But I suppose, like, before we get to that, could you guys talk about like your prior experience with filmmaking and what people might have seen already?
I'll
I'll
leave that
go
one to
first.
Taylor.
Hmm.
Uh,
I have no
Oh, fair enough.
filmmaking
Okay.
experience.
Hmm.
I've been producing podcasts since 2006, and Taylor was a fan of that podcast, which just happens to be about Lost.
Oh,
And
brilliant.
so
Lovely.
yeah, I was approached by Taylor, and I gotta say, like, I think as far as filmmaking goes, I think my position and what I'm doing has been working out pretty good. I
Hmm.
think. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're doing a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun thing about sort of indie film at this level is we're all just figuring it out. So why not? I thought Ralph's podcast skills and interview skills, it's the same thing. We're all just telling stories, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's just whether there are cameras or just microphones. And now there's cameras in podcasting, so it's all the same. I've done a few documentaries. The one most people know is called The Last Blockbuster. It's on Netflix. It's about the last blockbuster video
Hmm.
in the world, which is in Bend, Oregon. And I've done a couple other about music documentaries, and then I just finished one about Build-A-Bear Workshop, the teddy bear folks. So
Oh,
that should be
lovely. Yeah.
out soon.
Cool. Yeah, and obviously the documentary Getting Lost is about the TV show Lost. That's pretty apparent in the title. And we were saying before we started the recording, actually, that the wide appeal Lost has continued to have. Obviously, people watching it when it was on. I mentioned I found it a bit after it ended. There's people who've maybe finding it yesterday or could find it tomorrow. It's still very much present in the pop culture phenomenon, like sphere, so to speak. So what do you think, as people who've watched the show, what do you think makes it so appealing even all these years later?
Oh
You want
man.
to do that?
I mean,
I think
go ahead.
there's a wide appeal to Lost because there's a lot of stuff going on the show. So for sci-fi geeks like me,
Mm,
there's definitely stuff like Dharma Initiative, Polar Bears. There's stuff going on where it's like it piques my interest.
for
But
sure.
then, like, my mom watched Lost. She doesn't watch anything,
Mm,
but she was in it for the sort of soap opera nature of like Sawyer, Kate, and Jack.
Jack and
Like, how's
Kate,
that
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
go? And then it's just like a really well done drama. And so you're picking up all these different fandoms all in this one show. So if you're into supernatural stuff, you have stuff with Claire, with Walt. And if you want, sort of sleazy stuff, you have Kate swimming in a waterfall with Sawyer, both of them like down to their underwear. Like there's stuff for literally everybody. And with like such a diverse cast, of actors from around the world, like it hits it's on a global scale.
Yeah.
So it's that's what I think the appeal is. It just
Mm,
it reaches out to as many people as possible.
And it does all of those things really well, right? It's not
Yeah.
an okay sci-fi show. It's a great sci-fi show. And it's not an okay drama. It's a great drama. The characters are amazing, and the acting is great, and the writing is top notch. And it was, something we're definitely getting into in the doc, but it was kind of the first of that kind, right? The first show to have all of those things and have all the elements be quality and work well. So I think that's a testament to why people are still getting into it. When we announced this project, my mom started watching Lost for the first time
oh, nice.
only a few weeks ago. She's already in the middle of season 3.
Wow.
So that's, people are coming to it now, just like you said. And it's a different experience because we watched it when it aired and you had to wait a week. And the community aspect was so huge,
Mm,
talking to people all week before the next episode would come out. And people now don't get that because, when you finished episode 4, episode 5 is right there.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
ready
Right.
for you. So that's that's cool. And it's really cool to think about how different, for example, Connor, your experience with Lost coming at it 10 years after was from our experience, because it took us 6 years to watch Lost.
Yeah.
And we were thinking about it, in between seasons, there would be months and you just, what's going to happen? And they would do these alternative reality games, and, there was a video game, and there were books, and there were all these things. And it was like, for some of us, it was an obsession that lasted years and years. And now you can literally watch the whole thing in a couple weeks if you don't sleep.
Yeah, no, I mean, I've met people, I mentioned, I'm a big fan of Lost, I watched it, and they were like, oh yeah, I tried to watch that 20 years ago when it came out, but like I think stuff like the polar bears, and it was just like really thrown off. But I was saying, you really need, I think the way of having it through streaming and having it back to back to back is probably the way to go if you want to really stick with it. Otherwise, I feel like back in the day, if there's like an element that threw you off, it might put you off watching the next week, whereas at least this time round you kind of have the next episode right there if you really want to stick with it. But I mean, that's just my opinion. Maybe you guys think differently to that, but
there's pros and cons for each way of consuming the show. The pros of being able to binge it is that you can get through a bunch of episodes and have a lot of that stuff fresh in your mind.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're watching it on a week-to-week basis, you kind of have more time to sort of ingest that stuff if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So you can watch Lost, and by the next week, I could have conversations with people in Hawaii, people in Australia, people from around the world who were picking up clues and finding different things and spreading that information out. So you kind of, if you sought that kind of stuff, you're getting a really, really rich experience. If you're a casual TV fan and you are watching the show every week, some of that information might get lost. Yeah, lost. But you go from, like, if you're just going week to week, you're going to forget like about the polar bears. We've a lot of people that we've interviewed for the doc, a lot of times bring up the polar bears. Which is flat out answered in the epilogue of the new man in charge.
Yeah.
But if you pay attention to the show, if you pay attention to the show, you see that they found the polar bear in Tunisia. And when Ben Linus turned the wheel, he ended up in Tunisia.
Yeah.
And so you kind of can put the pieces together. But the problem is when you're watching it week to week, it's really hard to remember what pieces fit where. So now with binging, you can have all that stuff fresh in your mind over the course of a couple of months. But at the same time, for me personally, I would miss the in-between episodes, chatting with people online, listening to podcasts, and this community that came together through new things like Twitter was new and Facebook was new, podcasting was new, DVRs were new. So you were getting all this information and people freeze framing, taking pictures of clues and stuff. And so I would totally miss out on that stuff. What I don't miss is having to wait something like 6 months between the time John and Jack are looking down into the hatch, and then waiting to find out what it is, because at some point over the course of 6 months you run out of ideas, you run out of conversation. So that was kind of a bummer. I wish there was some sort of happy medium where you can just, I mean, you can just decide how you watch the show and consume it. Someone we talked to watches Lost every time their kid turns 13, and they would do it once a week. You get one episode, we'll be back next week. So they actually, even though they have the ability to binge the whole series, wanted to give their kids the time to sort of
that experience,
experience, to mull it over, to really think about what you saw. And what's good about that way is you get the best of both worlds. You get to have that time to think and discuss, but you don't have to wait the 6 months to find out that Desmond was in the hatch. So so yeah, it's what's great is now we live in an age where you can choose choose how you want to consume things.
For sure. This might be more of like a Taylor question, but I suppose like what kind of first sparked your thoughts to make the documentary? Like what was like your initial inspiration to do it?
Sure. It's got to be my all-time favorite TV show. I mean, I loved it at the time. I wasn't a filmmaker when Lost was on TV. I was trying to be a professional musician, trying real hard. But, I took a trip in 2010 while they were still filming the final season. My wife got me a trip for my birthday to Hawaii, and we visited the set, and they were filming episodes 612 and 613. And I got to watch them making Lost, my favorite TV show. I'm there, I'm experiencing, there's an explosion, they're killing off characters. I don't know what's happening because the first episode of season 6 hasn't aired yet.
Right. Yeah.
I'm seeing them film a scene with Jack's son, and I'm the most confused I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But I had been sort of not a filmmaker, but I was a kid in the 90s with the big video camera on the shoulder, shooting on VHS, editing with 2 VCRs. And it had always been something I did as a hobby. Like I would make music videos and things. But then when I got into filmmaking, like that time being on the Lost set always stuck with me as like, yeah, making movies, making TV, that's a cool thing to do.
Yeah.
That's something you could maybe do for a career, I hoped. And then it kind of went to the back of my mind, and I was doing other things. And I like doing nostalgic documentaries, like The Last Blockbuster. It's something from the 90s that we all remember. And I had always thought about doing a Lost documentary, but it didn't seem like it had been long enough, right? Like it just happened. In my mind, Lost just ended last week. Turns out it's been a while, but when it sort of dawned on me that 2024 is going to be the 20th anniversary of the crash of Flight 815 and the first episode airing, it seemed like that's the perfect time to look back. Nostalgia kind of goes in 20-year waves. And my wife, who had gotten me that trip a long time ago, she'd been bugging me, is there any way you can do a documentary so that we can go to Hawaii? Like
Perfect
anything,
excuse,
sea turtles, anything like that. And I was like, you know what? Lost.
Yeah.
We could definitely justify flying to Hawaii, going on vacation, but also filming a Lost documentary. And so she was on board. And then I called Ralph and was like, what do you think about doing a documentary? And this was in 2021, maybe? It's like we
November
have a few years until the 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
So let's start thinking about this. And it stayed, in the back of my mind. I did a couple more movies, and it just became like, well, if it's going to come out in 2024, we got to start making it sometime.
Yeah.
So about 5 months ago, we started actually doing the thing, and here we are talking to you.
Sure, yeah, and obviously, and thank you for taking the time to talk today. Yeah, I suppose, kind of with your own individual histories as viewers, like how did you first find Lost? Were you like hooked from the first episode, or were you caught up in like the phenomenon of it and you kind of jumped on a bit later?
I jumped on a little bit later. I first saw Lost. I remember the hype. I remember, oh my God, everybody's talking about this show. But at the time, I was, playing in a band, and I wasn't sitting at home at night watching network TV. I had given up on network television because it was kind of not great. So everybody's like, there's the show on ABC you got to watch. I'm like, sure, there's a show on ABC I've got to watch. Right on. And I was in a hotel somewhere traveling for something, and an episode came on, and it was the Michael and Walt episode in season 1.
Yeah.
With the polar bear, right? But I had no context. It just came on, and I was like, this show is terrible. Like, what is everyone talking about?
Yeah.
It's like the worst CGI polar bear I've ever seen. And who are these people? Why do I care? Because it does not work. You can't just watch an episode from the middle of the season by itself, but I didn't know it was that kind of show. Like
Right.
nobody
Yeah.
told me like you have to start at the beginning and watch through. They're like, you got to see this show. So I
Mm.
saw it, it was on hotel cable and I
Yeah.
put it on and there was that episode and I watched the whole episode and I was so confused. And I was like, okay, so it's about a psychic kid. It's a show about a psychic kid who can like summon animals from comic books. I think that's what the show is about. I guess people thought I would like it because I like comic books. Didn't make any sense. And then as season 1 was ending, somebody, I don't remember if you could illegally download shows at the time or if I waited for the DVD. But I got caught up between season 1 and 2. So I did not have to wait 6 months to find out what was in the hatch. And that to me felt like a really great medium of like, I can binge the first season. I think the first season is perfect for binging. Waiting a week is great, but you're getting mostly character backstory. So you binge it and it doesn't like ruin the mystery because they spread out that mystery in season 1 so well. And then I think I had to wait a month to find out who was in the hatch. And then I watched it in real time religiously. And then after I finished season 1, I discovered Lost podcasts and message boards and all that. So I had that month to really dive in and, oh, somebody found this Easter egg and this connects to this and that's this. And we all know what's going to be in the hatch and everybody guessed wrong mostly. But that was my intro to Lost. Was I spent months telling people how bad of a show it was. Like, you don't understand. It's just about a psychic kid who talks to birds. I don't know. Ralph, how did you get into it?
I actually was in there pretty much from the beginning. I didn't watch it the night it premiered.
Right.
But the next day at work, a friend of mine said, you got to watch this show Lost. And I'm like, I don't care about TV. I like watching movies. And so he's like, nah, just give it a shot. And he was so sincere about it. And he's like, listen, you'll love it. So I went home and I was lucky because my wife had given me a TiVo. And so I just went in and saw that on the Friday night after it premiered, they were showing the pilot part 1 and 2 back to back as one long thing.
Yeah.
And so I just hit record on it. And I was the next day, Saturday morning, I was waiting for my wife to get ready so we can go out to eat lunch. I was starving. The only thing I wanted to do is get out of the house. That's all I cared about, was getting out of the house. And she was taking forever. And then I'm like, there was nothing on TiVo, so I just watched Lost. And I got to the first scene, the first flashback scene with Jack on the airplane. And I'm like, oh, now they're going to show me what happened before this plane crash I just witnessed. So I stopped it. I rewound it to the beginning. And as soon as my wife was done getting ready for lunch, she came in. I said, come sit down with me. We're watching this thing. And we ended up actually going to lunch way later because we sat there and watched the two-part pilot.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then went to lunch and discussed it. And we're just like, oh man. So starting with Tabula Rasa, episode 2 or 3, depending on how you see things. I watched live. So everything was live from then on out. So I did have to wait the months for all the cliffhangers and all the everything.
I had a bit of a similar experience to you, Taylor, in that I'd seen at least a couple of episodes like out of context or out of order, and once I went actually watched the show through, and it made more sense. I mean, the main one was a man running around with a giant toy panda. I'm like, what is even going on here?
That's a rough one to see out of order.
Yeah.
That makes no sense because like the twist doesn't even make sense if you don't. We're seeing flash forwards and
didn't get it at all, and by that point it's like this beloved show, like hugely acclaimed show, and like I don't really get it based off of this episode. And I mean, there's another one, and I don't know if people watching this have watched all the show, but basically, without giving too much away, it was a bunch of characters walking through the woods, and a guy gets shot and killed with an arrow or something like that, or he gets shot and killed by somebody who he knows very well, and is like, I can't believe you did this to me. I don't know if I'm not being specific enough about what that is, but that was like a very kind of plot heavy moment that I just didn't get because I hadn't watched the whole show at that point. And once I did, it made a lot more sense. But it is definitely one of those shows where you need to watch the whole thing to be aware of everything that's going on. It's like a lot of like pots in that kitchen, so to speak, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we didn't know that because that hadn't been a thing. Network TV didn't do that before Lost. You know, The Sopranos had done it, and like a little bit with like Twin Peaks or the X-Files, but even that, you could just watch one episode of the X-Files.
Right.
So I assumed that I could just watch one episode of Lost because that's what TV was. And that's how mind-blowing it was at the time. It's like, now, of course, you have to watch every episode of Stranger Things or it's not going to make sense. You know, that we just know that.
Yeah.
But when Lost came out, we didn't know that. That was a new thing. They invented a thing, which was mainstream broadcast television that you had to watch in order from the beginning. And thankfully, because of the DVR and DVDs, and then later, you know, iTunes and streaming, you could track down the missing episodes. Because like in the 90s, if you missed an episode of the X-Files, you're just never going to see that episode
was it.
again.
Yeah.
Until they came out on VHS like years later.
Right.
Absolutely. And I know you guys have already announced some exciting speakers for this documentary, and I know this list might, you know, be added to after this is recorded. But I know the most recent one I saw was one of my favorite character actors, Eric Lang, who was Krasinski in definitely in a couple of the later seasons, maybe just in season 5. But I mean, what was it like, I suppose, like getting him on board to talk to you guys and that overall experience of talking to Eric Lang about Lost?
Well, to me, as a documentary filmmaker, it's my favorite thing, which is talking with somebody about their favorite thing, right? So the reason Eric Lang was excited to talk to us when we reached out was because it's still his favorite project, or one of his favorite projects. He's been on a ton of TV shows, a bunch of movies. You know, he's one of those character actors that's just working all the time. But when you get to sit down with somebody who, he's done a ton of projects, but as soon as you start talking about Lost, you know, he just lights up, and it's just like it's the greatest time, you know, one of the greatest times in his life. You know, maybe at the end when he's in a church going on to the next thing, it's with all the people from Lost. Who knows? But I think that's why I love doing this kind of documentary, you know, the pop culture thing on like the 20-year cycle, because it's been years. It's not like he's talking to people about Lost every day. Most people don't talk about Lost every day anymore. Because it's been a while. We're weird. But you know, all the cast and crew people we've talked to so far, they love it. Even the ones for whom it's not their favorite thing, it's still really fun to talk about, because you know, it sparks these memories that are like, oh right, oh, and then we were in Hawaii. That's the other thing. It's so different. Most TV is shot in LA or New York, maybe Vancouver. This was in Hawaii. They all got to be basically on vacation. So the memories of making Lost for them are really special, because they were also in Hawaii for however long they were filming. And that's not a bad place to be.
For sure. Yeah, and I saw another person that you guys managed to get was Sean Whalen, who was Frogger, a kind of a very like fan favorite, memorable character. And I suppose, like, what was your experience of speaking with him?
I feel like I feel like Taylor and I were very excited about Sean Whalen for being in Lost, but for being in other stuff that sort of like affects our lives. Now, for me, growing up, the Got Milk commercial that he's in, like we would mispronounce Aaron Burr all the time. It was a running joke in our family, that wonderful commercial that Michael Bay directed. It just has stuck in my brain. And anytime, if someone were to ask me, which no one asks me, if someone were to ask me what my favorite commercial of all time is, I would probably say that one, because it's so well done and well directed, and it's just a great commercial. So it was like a bonus. Like, yes, we get to go talk about Neil Frogert, who's on screen for probably a maximum of 5 minutes. I don't know the actual runtime. he was more myth by the time he came onto the show.
Yeah.
The name Neil Frogert was just kind of thrown out there,
Well,
and we
I mean,
finally got to meet him.
they,
And before we even got to know him, he got shot with the arrow.
and I
Uh,
think they also made like web content episodes, and he was a bigger character in those. But in terms of like the actual
which,
main Lost storyline, yeah, he was like pretty much.
which that was fun to talk about. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
if I want to spoil this, but he got. Am I remembering this correctly, Taylor? He actually flew out to Hawaii just to do that web video.
Yeah, yeah. I think it
Like,
was the first thing he did was that Mobisode, and again, like web content wasn't really a thing. Like they called them Mobisodes. That didn't really stick. We're not still because it
Yeah.
was for mobile phones.
Oh, I
They were
see.
calling
Yeah,
them
yeah.
mobile
like
phones,
you
and it
need
was
you needed a specific like Nokia or something. You
yeah,
needed a
yeah. It was
very
like Sprint Nokia presents Lost Mobisodes.
Mm.
And they flew him out to Hawaii to shoot one of those, which was basically, they cast him in the show and he went out to do one of those. And then I think it was a whole separate, like months later, that he came back to be in a real episode.
Yeah. But to answer your previous question, Taylor, do you want to say why you were excited?
Oh yeah,
About
Sean
Sean?
Whalen is in my all-time favorite movie, which is That Thing You Do, written and directed by Tom Hanks.
Ah, okay.
These classic fake rock and roll biopic. But he, as much as Ralph loves the milk commercial, I love That Thing You Do. So, we talked about Lost with Sean, but we were mostly just geeking out about things, these weird. I mean, the man was in Twister.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking to him about milk commercials and That Thing You Do.
And that was what was fun. What's great about Sean is like me and Taylor, like leading up to the interview, like I just kind of want, if I can get any tidbit about the milk commercial, and you were kind of like, oh, I got to talk to him. I brought my record, That Thing You Do record, and I wanted to have him sign it. So we get there, like I'm like, but we need to be professional. We can't be geeking out over this guy.
Yeah.
But while we're setting up at his place, all the camera equipment and sound and stuff, Sean asked us, "Is there anything you want to know?" And I Taylor went first, and they talked about That Thing You Do, and Taylor was so happy. We got pictures with Taylor and Sean with the signed album. But then when things were getting struck down and we're taking all the camera stuff down, he again asked, "Is there anything else you'd like to know?" And I got to talk about the Got Milk commercial, which is it's a pretty crazy story. And if you follow Sean on TikTok, he tells it in full. I highly recommend hearing it through Sean rather than me trying to explain it. But let's just say having peanut butter in your mouth all day is not a good thing.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I suppose like on the topic of like favorite actors or characters like from Lost itself, like I imagine everyone who's watched the show might have a different answer if you ask who your favorite character or actor from the show is or was. Like, who would your picks be if you had to like pick a favorite character or favorite actor?
I have two answers. I have a favorite actor and a favorite character.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah.
I have two answers for characters because, spoiler alert, one of them doesn't make it that long.
Yeah.
But I was a Charlie fan because I was a musician, and I was I was like, oh, if I was in a plane crash, that would be me. Like, don't you know who I am? I'm famous. I'm a bloody rock god. So Charlie was my favorite character, not because he was morally great or anything, but because he was Charlie, and it's Dominic Monaghan. I mean, this is Lord of the Rings. Come on.
Yeah.
At the time, he was the famous guy from the show.
Dominic Monaghan.
Yeah. We all loved him. And he was my favorite until about halfway through the show. I don't know, I hope your viewers have seen Lost, but then there was like a literal handing off of the baton moment, because from then on, my favorite character was Hurley. Yeah. And there's, the moment when Hurley finds out about Charlie is still, to me, the most heartbreaking moment.
It's devastating.
In television. There's that.
It's
there's
devastating.
The Juliet moments and stuff, but like that moment, but it also was just like, oh, Charlie is with you now. And so now you're my favorite. So
Yeah, yeah.
that was my character journey of
Mm.
favorites. And then, you know, at the end, I'm just like, I knew it. I was right all along.
I always like Hurley. He's the one with the Green Lantern comic, and that's the Green Lantern that appears. Is Kyle Rayner.
Yeah.
Totally. You never saw, like, other than like the Simpsons, like comic book guys. You never saw just like, it's just like a regular guy. I didn't sort of associate myself with like a rock star or a doctor. Like, that's not me.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a fugitive. So when it came to Hurley, I'm like, that guy right there feels like the most real person on this island, because
Yeah.
you didn't know what he like, wasn't defined by like his job. And his flashback came so late in the first season. We already
Yeah.
knew that Sawyer was a con man, and Michael was an artist and a father, and like, but from Hurley on the island, you could just get the sense of, oh, he likes listening to music. I like listening to music, reading comics, and sort of just like, kind of like, he's the most sort of common man, fish out of water. Like, he's just like there to experience it.
Yeah.
And that's how I felt. Like, I wouldn't be one of the guys who like goes on the trek to find the receiver or find the black box or whatever. I'm not that kind of guy. But Hurley was always my favorite. As far as acting wise, I mean, geez Louise, Michael Emerson, Terry O'Quinn. It's hard. Like, like those guys, like everybody on the show put in amazing performances, but there's something different about those two where you're just like, wow, this is the kind of stuff you see in like really, really good dramatic films. And even with Dominic Monaghan, he was in movies, and you didn't, at the time, you didn't see movie stars do TV. You're either a TV star or a movie star.
That crossover,
and Lost kind of changed that too. Like before that, you would just have your TV guys and you'd have your movie guys. But seeing him on a poster for a TV show, or in because they really did a lot of the marketing around him. They would use like all his lines. It was always, guys, where are we? In every single trailer leading up to the pilot. And it was saying like, listen, this is quality stuff. We've got a genuine movie star. He was just in this thing that was nominated and won every Academy Award for the biggest screen franchise at the time. And we got him on our show. And so like, that's another thing that sort of changed Lost. Or changed with Lost was sort of bringing in like people, you know, from the big screen onto the small screen, because the quality that Lost brought sort of reeled those people in. So
I mean, it goes back to like the diversity and wide appeal that we were talking about earlier, in that, you know, 10 people could watch Lost, but, you know, with completely different perspectives and completely different characters and stories, and you kind of finish it and have completely different takeaways from it. You know, it can be watched in so many different ways depending on who you are and who you relate to. I mean, even like, just to answer my own question, and not necessarily because I relate to the character, but for me, like, I would say John Locke, just because that epic kind of story from beginning to end. And I had the chance to speak to Terry on Twitter when he was still on it a few years ago. He's very open about talking about Locke and Lost in general. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if you've got anyone that you've mentioned, like, you know, Terry or Dominic Monaghan or any of them in the documentary, but I imagine, just those people who were there at the very beginning, you know, would be great to talk to. I'm sure.
Yeah, it's been a blast. It's been a blast talking to these folks, because like, even with Eric, like, I didn't know what to expect. Like, as far as I know, you have this character Rosinski who's just a complete a-hole. And to see him, I was, you know, you get a little bit nervous, or I do, because I'm new to this whole thing. But I mean, Eric couldn't be any more of a peach. Eric was so kind and lovely, and he brought out the glasses. He brought out a Dharma beer and a script, and it was just like, just the joy. Like, I find it really interesting. Like, going into each interview, I'm really anxious and nervous to see how it's going to go, because you don't know. But by the end of it, even after the cameras are done rolling, almost everybody still wants to keep talking about Lost. So it's almost like, oh, we're like, we become friends in the hour and a half that we have this discussion about Lost. Like we instantly become like these friends who just want to talk about it more after all these years. I still like the fact that there's some questions that were left open. Otherwise, there'd be nothing to talk about. Like we could still theorize about Lost all these years later. And I feel like the show's given us enough stuff where we can fill in the gaps and create our own answers based on stuff that I remember from the show and stuff that you remember from the show. And we can kind of like bring all those things together and sort of come up with our own answers, which I think is why Lost is still so endearing. Like after all these years, people are still talking about it, because if they answered every little thing, then what would we talk about?
Yeah.
You got it. It's done. The show's finished. So it's been just a blast talking to everybody involved with the show and with fans. Yeah, it's been a pretty fun journey so far.
Yeah, and obviously, to use a very intentional Charlie pun, but obviously if we want to look at Lost's greatest hits throughout the 6 seasons, and like, I'm thinking top of my head, like ending of Walkabout, probably a defining moment of the whole show. The final scene, another one. But like, what would be your kind of like greatest hit, or like someone kind of asked you, like, what would be the first thing that comes to your mind if you were asked about Lost?
Yeah, it's all those, the ones, and we ask everybody, what stands out, and that the moment in Walkabout, I think for almost everybody, is the moment they fell in love with the show.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's early. It's the 3rd or 4th episode, depending on how you count, which we should really decide at some point how we're going to refer to it and stop saying that every time. But 3rd or 4th episode. But that moment, for me coming into it, having seen an episode and hated it, then seeing the pilot and being like, oh my God. And then they give us the Kate episode, which is a good episode, but it's not, oh my God. It's like, oh, it's going to be like this. I get it. It's flashbacks and character stuff. And then to get that twist in Walkabout was just like, oh, this is my favorite show now. So it's hard to
so well directed.
Yeah.
It's so well directed. Like it didn't even occur to me. And what's great about that Kate episode too is it's just like, here's what happened. Because we, like from the get-go, one of the first mysteries is there's handcuffs. We see these handcuffs. Who did they belong to? And so we kind of get that answered right away. And we're like, oh, it's like, you're probably like, oh, it's probably Sawyer. Yeah. But it's Kate. And you're like, oh, but she's the nice lady that helped the doc with his stitches.
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay. So it kind of flips on its head. But then in the Walkabout episode, you're just thinking, okay, cool. We're going to see this guy's backstory. Not even remotely thinking that there's going to be a twist, because at this point we don't, it's the twists are kind of whatever. They're not, there's nothing super crazy. Like we're so focused on what's in the jungle. Is it dinosaurs? Did they die? Were you thinking of all this stuff?
Yeah.
And you're not thinking, oh, this guy's in a wheelchair, but it's directed and staged and set up so wonderfully. I think it was Jack Bender, maybe.
Yeah.
It gets you when he pulls out from that desk and yelling.
Oh,
you can't incredible moment.
Like
then they go back to the scene from the pilot where he wiggles his toes, and it recontextualizes the pilot, so it makes you 3 episodes in, you're like, I got to go back and watch the first episode again.
Absolutely,
which is a common thing for Lost. Like something will happen, and you'll be like, oh, I got to go back and watch season 2 episode.
We need to watch that again.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to watch that again. But to answer your question without just talking about Walkabout forever, there are a bunch. I think the opening of season 2, Desmond in the Hatch, is huge.
Yeah.
Because it made the world of the show so much big. It's like where we get the Dharma Initiative and all this, like what becomes the mythology. And Desmond, another beloved fan favorite character.
Yeah.
Just that intro of like, what show am I watching? Why is there a dude? What? It's a washer.
You think you're jumping in on a flashback.
Yeah.
So all the times they pull the rug out from under you, the end of season 3 with we have to go back. Game changer. And with the panda, the Sun and Jin episode where it pulls the rug out from under you in a whole new way is just just mind-blowing. And then, obviously the ending is very controversial, but I think moments in season 6, almost every moment where the people remember, where they wake up,
it's
like I'm gonna tear up thinking about
genuinely
Charlie
really
and
moving,
Claire,
aren't they?
or Sawyer and Juliet. We can go Dutch. Like, these things are iconic TV moments that I don't think have been matched to this day, which is
for
why
sure.
we're still talking about Lost.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's quite fun for me because I don't know who you've spoken to, so I might be about to say something you guys already know. But I came across like recently, and I don't know whether this is true or not, or like an urban legend about Lost, in that the twist for Walkabout apparently like came really late, to the point where like Terry O'Quinn said if he had known about it sooner, he would have changed his performance to kind of match up with that twist, because he was like, oh, what I was doing didn't really match up to how I think someone with that twist would act. I mean, we already said what the twist is, but he was saying that he didn't know, and if he had known, he would have like changed subtly how he played Locke. But I mean, it just come up with something that incredible on such short notice and becomes like a defining part of the show. It just sounds insane, and I mean, yeah, it's incredible.
I feel like through our interviews and stuff, like producing Lost kind of felt like it was fly by the seat of your pants. You get a lot of curveballs.
Yeah.
Like when Adewale decides he doesn't want to be on the show anymore.
Yeah.
You gotta pivot. You gotta do a lot of pivoting. So I mean, who knows how much they knew, but it sounds like they have like a specific plan. But I mean, things happen. Things happen. Episode 2 for the road, we assume, is the result of the DUIs from two of the actors on the show, but I don't know. We don't know, but it seems like trying to like just producing this movie with Taylor and trying to get stuff organized is it's pretty intense, trying to get stuff and have it everything fit into place. I can't even imagine what it was like to produce Lost, with having the creative team in Los Angeles and having the production in Hawaii. Like, we're Zooming right now. I don't know if Zoom technology was this easy in 2004, but I can't imagine this production schedule, everything, the fact that everything's so quality. I'm not even like, even if they were making it up the whole time, like as they went, whatever, like they pulled it off somehow. I don't know how.
Sure.
I don't know how they produced 121 episodes. Of
Depends
television.
on how you
something like that.
With this quality though, like the quality is set so high from everything from casting, which is like one of the first things you do, location scouting,
music,
turning Hawaii into global locations, and all the way to the music, which is usually the last thing put in. And it's like the quality across the board is through the roof, that I don't really have any complaints about the show as it was presented to us. Season 3, I know a lot of people say kind of spun its wheels a little bit, but they didn't have an end date yet. So it's like, well, if we don't have an end date, we got to start doing something to pad out some stories. So maybe we grab a couple of background characters, quote, that were there the whole time, and introduce them in season 3, Nikki and Paolo. And it's one of those things where with the newly found internet, they let you know right off the bat, we're not down with these two. But you mentioned earlier, Taylor, that you can't really just watch one episode and understand it or follow it. I think there's, well, I mean, the pilot, you can, but there's one episode I think you could do that with, and that's Expose. I think Expose is like, it might not be people's favorite characters, but that chunk of 42 minutes is like it's like an amazing piece of television. It's a Twilight Zone episode. I think anybody could just jump on and just watch that and just be like completely entertained. And then if they have no context of what the show is, you can let them know. The people that got buried alive were buried by the heroes of the show. The main characters of the show just buried these two people alive. and I there's something about expose I think that I think should be revisited by everybody, because I think as far as an hour TV goes, it's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, even kind of like to your point of being, like, kind of as they went along, adding details in, that there might have been like an alternate reality where Michael Emerson was just Henry Gale from Minnesota, and that was it. Apparently,
Right.
that was like, they kind
That
of
was the
That's
decided
where
plan.
to
pivoting's
expand on
good.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, they pivoted with that character. He was supposed to be like a one-off thing, and then after his performance, they changed the route of the show based on him. And I mean, we're all much better off for it. So
Yeah.
anyone who ever complains about them sort of making it up as they went along, like, yeah, but the stuff they made up was pretty good.
Yeah.
Really good. So I don't
And we got
fault them for
Emerson out
that.
of it. So here you go.
Yeah.
Who's
And
amazing.
like a lot of people did stop watching mid season 3
Yeah.
or season 2. Like there are 3 types of Lost people. There's people who watched the whole thing and loved it, watched the whole thing and were disappointed, felt like they wanted their 6 years back. And then there's all the people who watched some of it and gave up.
Yeah.
Right. So the Walking Dead people. Because I know a million people who have started The Walking Dead. I know 0 people who have finished The Walking Dead. Nothing against it. I'm one of the people who fell off. But Lost, I think it's almost equal thirds of people who loved it, people who hated it, and people who just didn't finish it because they got confused or they got bored or their lives, something came up in their lives. They got a different job and they could no longer dedicate every Thursday night to a TV show. But those people that fell off, they missed what I think are the best parts, because one of the other things that Lost pioneered, like Ralph was saying, is middle of season 3, they didn't have an end date. But then there's a writer's strike and there's all these conversations. And all of a sudden, for one of the first times ever, a television show knows exactly how many episodes are left. Now it's normal. Now they start and they go, oh, The Last of Us, we're going to have 11 episodes. That's it. That's the story. And they write the whole thing and there's no filler episodes or anything. But when Lost was around, nobody had done that. Nobody was trying to end popular shows. And so once they had that end date and the pace really picks up and they start, like they're answering mysteries, and now there's time travel, and now there's this, and we know everybody's going to want to see the incident. How do we get to that? And it just got, in my opinion, it got so good that I feel bad for the people who fell off mid season 3 or season 2, because like, you don't know what you missed, man.
There's a definite shift in the show too. There's an episode that is like notorious for being everyone's least favorite, which is Stranger in a Strange Land, which is followed by one of the most joyful episodes ever, which is everybody. Oh man, it's Trisha Tanaka is dead.
Yeah,
it's the one with the Shambhala. Like those are back to back. And from Trisha Tanaka is dead on, I think the show is just like it hits the ground running. It's amazing from that point on. And it's just like there's just a few episodes in the middle of season 3 where the wheels felt like they're kind of spinning a little bit. But also one of the issues with season 3 is we had waited so long for them to come back from season 2. They aired 6 episodes, which they called the pod. So from like September to December, it was like those episodes, and it was mostly them in the cage, and we didn't get back to Hurley and Desmond and those people until like episode 4 or something, episode 3 or 4. And then after those 6 episodes, they stopped from like December to like February, and then they came back for like 2 weeks and then had a week off. And it was so hard. There was a website that was called something to the effect of "Is Lost new tonight?" And you'd click the link and it would say yes, or it would say no, because the schedule got so jumbled up and crazy. Like, why would you want to stick with something that's, it's already testing your mental acuity? Like it's really testing you on a mental level. And to be sort of jerked around with the schedule made it like, I can't stick with this. How am I supposed to remember what happened on the previous episode if it was in December and now it's February? So once they hit that end date, it was like, okay, here we go. This is how many episodes are left, and this is how many are going to be in each season, and they all will air continuously. There might have been like maybe a holiday break or something, but it was still it man.
But they knew, like, not only did they know how many episodes, but there was like an air date schedule that you could look at before the season even started. Like, we knew the day the finale was going to air, I think before the final season even started. Like, we all just knew.
Yeah.
And there was none of that. Yeah, you're right. Season 3 was hard to watch in real time, not through any fault of, the writing or the acting or anything like that. It was just the logistics of, and it was really unfortunate. That first pod of season 3 is unfortunate timing, because those are some slow episodes where you literally lock our main characters in a cage to stop the plot from moving forward. Right? Because they don't know, do we need to stretch this for 10 seasons, 12 seasons? And then, the unfortunateness of then having to wait 3 months to see what happens.
Right.
Which you don't have to deal with now, because you stream it and those 6 episodes just happen just as quick as
just
any
fly
other.
by.
And then all of a sudden Trisha Tanaka is dead, and you're like, the show's great, and it just keeps going.
That episode's probably the most joy I get out of any episode of Lost. The Shambhala and the Roger Workman. And,
they open the beers, and you're just like, finally.
Yes.
Finally,
just hang out with these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even you talking about early season 3, and you kind of like the amount of really talented actors that Lost had, along its way. But even like, thinking of early season 3, the actress who played Colleen, I think her name was, one of the others, she was just the lead in like a cop drama over here. And I was like, oh, Lost. That's what I know. And she was in the Hunger Games as well, but like this really talented actress. But when Lost is one of the big things I remember her from, and not a very big part, but there's quite a few people like that. Even Lance Reddick, who's passed recently, Matthew Abaddon, that was a great character. And I mean, do you have any like favorites of those kind of like well-known actors but didn't play huge parts in Lost, so to speak?
Well, I was just going to mention that is kind of sort of whatever you feel about the beginning of season 3. It opens with the amazing Elizabeth Mitchell introducing her character of Juliet. And I really hadn't seen anything from her before Lost. But she turned out, like, I never really cared about relationships and stuff, but her and Sawyer, when that started going down, I was like, okay, these guys need to be protected at all costs. But I mean, it is fun seeing like Cheech, when Cheech showed up, and he's not like he's a big name over here, but
not at that time, really. Like, we had, well,
he'd Nash Bridges.
He was on Nash Bridges.
But yeah, I'm trying to think of like there's a ton of like character actors. MC Gainey, I'm a big fan of.
That's a good pick.
I love that Rob McElhenney from Always Sunny was the tiniest part on Lost. But it was like before, or maybe Always Sunny had just started, but it wasn't a big deal. And now he's, this big star buying football clubs with Ryan Reynolds. And the other one is John Grease, who played Roger Workman.
Right.
Who has gone on to be in The White Lotus and just won an Emmy. And he's just like, I feel proud when somebody who was just a little part of Lost goes on.
Right.
Like, they have these careers, and you're just like, but they're my friend from this thing that we all live through together in real time. Like, we're from the island together. Me and John Grease.
I recently,
we're not friends.
I recently went and saw John Wick Chapter 4, and there's three actors from Lost in it, and that I was thrilled, because you have Lance Reddick, you have Clancy Brown, who played a bit part, and then I don't remember the actor's name who played Dogen in season 6. Was also in it. And you just like, it's one of those things where anytime I see someone from Lost pop up in something, I'm like, I perk up. I'm like, okay, here we go.
It's like,
There we go.
it's good to see them. It's like we're at a high school reunion or something. Like, oh,
Yeah.
how have you been? Which, making this documentary, I hope when this
Yeah.
documentary comes out, people will feel that watching this, because it's exactly that. We're going and finding our old friends, and we're having a little reunion where we chat about this thing we all loved,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
which is fun.